First off, I wouldn't trust anyone with an MD after their name because I know their education. I know what they're getting educated on, and it is not to help people.
How do you reverse the negative effects that antibiotic then has on your microbiome?
Learn about natural antibiotics. For one, garlic has more antibiotic properties than penicillin. So I like to remind people that antibiotics came from a natural source originally. They just turned it into something completely different and made all these additives in order to sell it at a much higher price tag. You need to learn that there are natural ways of helping your body. And when you're having chronic conditions like ear infections or throat infections or whatever, that is saying like, hey, if you're having this on a regular basis, something's wrong and you need to figure out why you're having these. Don't just keep getting the antibiotics. So what we consider new age medicine is not new. It's the old medicine, and we're needing to find our way back to it. Before we had Western doctors, we had natural medicine. This is what we did.
Welcome to the Be Better broadcast. Today, we are joined by guest Linn Rivers. And for those who don't know Linn Rivers is a functional health and wellness expert and an educator. She teaches people all over the world how to take their health into their own hands, their mind, body, and their spirit. With over 15 years in the holistic health field and her own arduous past, she is able to guide those who are ready to a happier and a healthier way of living. We're going to have a really fun conversation today about how you can eliminate chronic pain, chronic diseases, suffering physically, but also suffering in your mind, suffering within your spirit. So this is going to be a conversation that touches on multiple subjects, all with the intention of helping you to take your health into your own hands. When you take even just one thing away from this conversation with Linn and myself, all that we ask is you share this show with just one other person who could use it as well. You are the reason that the Be Better broadcast has grown the way that it has over the past 3 years, because you are the best part of the Be Better team. Without further ado, all the way from Austin, Texas, Linn, it's great to have you on the show.
I'm so excited to be here with you. Thanks for having me.
100%. So let me ask you this, and you can start this off however you like. I'm curious to hear from your own perspective and from your experience. What does it mean to take your health into your own hands?
That is the big question, right? It means knowing your body better than anyone else. I think that we tend to give our health away to the medical system, right? As though they know better. And the reality is, you know your symptoms, you know what you're feeling, you know what you're going through. Therefore, you should know what is actually happening in your body that's causing those symptoms, that's causing those issues that you're dealing with. And unfortunately, we don't. We're not taught this, and this should be elementary. We should know, like, hey, I'm having this problem. Maybe this is happening because of XYZ, and our health can actually really be simplified in 3 steps. And unfortunately, we're not given that information. And the Western medical system, they don't know this information. I like to start this off by reminding people that the doctors that you're seeing, they're not smart, they're trained. They're trained to prescribe, they're trained to treat symptoms, but they're not actually trained to help you heal at a root cause level. And that's what I'm talking about, is understanding the root cause of disease, of discomfort, all of these different things that are happening, and being able to navigate them yourself, unless it's a really dire situation, unless it's an emergency, like an acute condition.
Yeah, very well said. What you said is so important too. Doctors are not trained to know 99% of what they should know in today's world. And that's not, sure, it could be a fault of their own. They could self-study these things, but you don't really know what you don't know. And if you don't know that you should be studying something that you don't know, then you're never going to study it unless you stumble across it or you come across it from experience. But I think it's important to say that these are good people. Most of them, of course, obviously there's always bad eggs everywhere, but most of them are good people who became doctors because they want to help you. They want to help you overcome these chronic conditions. They want to help you to feel better and take your health in your own hands, but they're not trained to do so. And it baffles me how little doctors understand basic tenets of nutrition even. Like, as an example, I've been on an animal-based diet now it was strict carnivore for about 3 months, and I've been animal-based now for a month on top of that. And I feel better. I look better. My energy levels have skyrocketed. And my dad started this. My mom started this. I've got friends who started this. But my dad fell off the wagon and he's like, my doctor said I shouldn't be doing this. My doctor said I should be doing this. I should be doing this. And I said, and I know his doctor, I said, Dad, look at your doctor. Do you believe this is someone that you should be taking health advice from? This is someone who's probably experiencing as much discomfort and suffering as you are. But you're taking advice from them versus someone who is educated, maybe not with MD next to their name, but educated from experience and educated from what they've seen from other people as well. So I think it's important to say that they're nice people who want to help you, but they're not educated necessarily in how to best help you.
Right. And so I think the big point there is, first off, I wouldn't trust anyone with an MD after their name because I know their education. I know what they're getting educated on, and it is not to help people. And unfortunately, you're right. A lot of people go into that field thinking, oh my God, I'm going to help people. And they get so sucked into that mentality. Right. And that's the unfortunate part because they believe the system, they believe what they're being taught. And so they continue to preach it with, authority. And they take real information, real knowledge, and they push it aside. They think, no, this isn't true because this is what I learned. And I learned in a university, and I have a medical degree, and they take that to heart. And unfortunately, a lot of people, 90% of the population, they follow what they are taught without ever questioning it. And that's where we get into trouble. We take on that information and we pass it on to others who are also just absorbing it and saying, this is how I should do it. And it's really funny that you bring up the carnivore diet because I actually have a client right now who he had high cholesterol. And I'm not talking regular number cholesterols because I want to make a point to people right now that the total cholesterol that you typically get from a panel, that does not matter one bit. What matters is looking at the numbers below that. You need to know your cholesterol numbers, right? And his were 800 points over what the top is of what you would want it to be. So we needed to drop him so low. And I put him on a keto diet. And sure enough, only 1 month in, and his points came down 700 points.
Whoa.
He's still in the red, but he dropped 700 points in a month on the small dense cholesterol. And that's a beautiful thing, right? Now the thing with why people feel so good on the carnivore diet, I want to bring this up really quick. That's because we have so much dysbiosis. And that is where a lot of disease comes from, is dysbiosis in the gut. So your gut microbiome is out of balance. And we end up with small bacterial overgrowth, SIBO, which I'm sure people are familiar with at this point. And when that happens, we can't actually digest the food because we have bad bacteria that's eating it. And when they overpopulate, they can cause over 85% of disease that people have can be linked to the gut and our dysbiotic guts, right? And so that's why we feel so good, because we're pulling out these foods that our gut bacteria is eating. And so it's a beautiful tool to utilize to get back to a better, system. However, a lot of people, they're not able to get back to that space because they're not given the tools how to do that. And so I eat predominantly a carnivore diet with a few other things thrown in, but the fiber, we need to figure that piece out, right? It's fiber from just plants. Like if you're eating vegetables, that is just going to continue feeding that dysbiosis. And so we need to figure out, okay, well, how is that going to work? And I'm giving you an awesome tool here, but if you've ever heard of carbonate bread.
No, carbonate bread?
Yeah, so it's a keto bread. So it is literally only 3 grams of carbs per either bun or bagel, whatever you're eating. And it's such a high fiber content, but it doesn't have, so it's mostly made with psyllium husk, which does not include a lot of salicylates or histamines, which are plant compounds that cause a lot of issues in our bodies. And so incorporating that fiber for people has been a game changer in my life and my practice. So that's something to throw in there.
So you say incorporating that fiber into their life, but not only incorporating it, but eliminating other things and replacing it with that, it sounds like.
Right. Well, and this is for the phase of healing your gut, right? So there's a lot that goes into healing your gut. But when okay, let me make a point here really quick. So our gut literally starts from the second we put something in our mouth, and it goes all the way through until it passes out. it's literally like a hollow tube, right? And everything in there, we have microbiome everywhere, right? We're more microbiome than we are human cells. We're like 10% human cells, and the rest of us are microbiome. And the microbiome does so much for us. It regulates our foods. It, digests our foods for us and gives us nutrients. It creates its own nutrients. There's so much that it does for us. And when that's out of balance, we can't process things. And I mean, there are certain bacteria that they're linking right now directly to Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's and all these things. And they're looking at it right now as like, oh, 10 years from now, we'll have a probiotic where if someone is having symptoms of Alzheimer's, we'll give them this and it'll correct the imbalance, right? And so I want people to sink that in. Like, our gut is so important, and we have destroyed it with antibiotics and vaccines and all of these medications and steroids. And when it's not in balance and it can't actually process our foods for us, what happens is our gut becomes leaky. And it's so leaky gut syndrome. That's another term that's been thrown around a lot. But what that really means is that our permeability of our gut, it's lost integrity. Okay. And so it creates little holes, and those holes allow foods to actually seep through into our bloodstream. So we're not breaking down our foods, and the little food particles are seeping in. And obviously our immune system is like, hey, what's this? I'm going to come after it. It shouldn't be here. And so then our immune system goes haywire. And then there's also little things called LPS, which are lipopolysaccharides. And that can be linked back to so many different morbidities of anything in the Western medical system. When people are in the hospital and they end up dying, a lot of times you can link it back to LPS. And there's so much more that goes into that, but I just want to like touch on that really quick, because what happens is those are neurotoxins that are seeping into our system. And we have salicylates, oxalates, histamines, all these things from plant foods that people don't think to like wrap their head around. Like, oh, well, plants are good for us, right? We should be eating more plants. But the reality is we were never meant to eat all of these different varieties of plants and so many of them at the same time. Salicylates are toxins. And when we eat too many of them, it can be deadly. Okay. Yeah. And now you would have to eat really high quantities. But the thing is, we're doing that on a regular basis in our society because we think, oh, well, we should be eating more of a vegan diet. Mm-hmm. And the reality is you're eating plants from places that, one, they're not ripe, they're not in season, and they're not actual vegetables that we would typically get. They're hybrids at this point. We've created so many different vegetables. And so their chemical process to protect themselves from being eaten, all of those toxins we're ingesting and our liver has to break down. So when we have a stagnant liver, when we're not processing things correctly, it just starts building up. And this is why we have so many chronic conditions at this point in life. I mean, it's 1 in 3 at this point has a chronic health condition, and so it's something to really wrap your head around, that it's not black and white. It's not, hey, eat a vegan diet and you're going to be healthy, or eat carnivore and you're going to be healthy, because there's so many things that go into it. And we just need to get ourselves to understand all of this information and to know what we're doing, and to be like, oh, I'm eating this, and when I eat XYZ, I feel like crap. I know this. And so then do something about it. You don't need a doctor to tell you that. You know that something isn't making you feel good. So let's figure out why, right? You should know what's happening.
100%. And like, then people will say, well, if I don't know what's going on, then I have to go to a trained physician. But again, they're not going to know either. So let me ask you this, and I want to ask you more about the gut too, because that was very fascinating, and I'm very ignorant on this topic, and I'm sure many people listening are as well. How do you suggest that people self-educate? Like, if they're not feeling great, then how should we and can we diagnose why we're not feeling great?
Well, see, that's where you want to go see a functional medicine practitioner, right? Someone who is trained in gut protocols and who knows why those things are happening, and to look at the symptoms and know that there's a root cause for them. So one of the things that I like to remind people, and honestly, this is still a really big issue, even in the functional medicine world, where a lot of practitioners, they still hone in on one thing. It's the liver, it's the gut, it's XYZ, instead of putting it all together. And they still take on disease as like, okay, well, you have, ALS, or you have Crohn's disease, or you have any of these diseases, right? There's millions of diseases at this point. But the bottom line is all disease can be linked back to a root cause. And disease, any disease that you're diagnosed with, is just an underlying symptom of something out of balance, right? You can give a name to everything. Oh, you have the symptom. It can be anything. It can literally, one symptom can be like part of 10,000 diagnoses, right? And so to remember that when you're diagnosed with something, that doesn't mean anything other than there's an imbalance in your body and it needs to be fixed. Now, granted, yes, some people are born with obviously extreme genetic mutations, and they have, symptoms that they may have the rest of their lives, but there's still ways to simplify those, and there's still ways to make their lives better when we understand the root of it. And you want to look at like, okay, did I take antibiotics at any point in my life? Yes. Okay. Did I take vaccines? Yes. Okay. All of these things, you just want to look back and see like, did I drink alcohol? Did I smoke? Did I do all of these things that may have damaged my system? And you know what? When you're not aware of those things and you're not making the changes in your lives to get better, those things are just going to progressively get worse. We might be okay through our 20s, doing that, but eventually our body's like, okay, like you need to correct what you did. And I like to look back at my life, and I think like when I was a kid, one, I was on antibiotics from the time I was 1 year old. I was on steroids the majority of my, childhood years, teen years, for asthma.
Wow.
And I was always on antibiotics, always on steroids. Something was always in my body. And I looked back and I think I would have been diagnosed with autism as a child very early on because of the way that I process things. I was very, very centered. I was very like analytical, very serious. Like people would tell me jokes and I would be like, they'd go right over my head. It was just like the way that I operated, the way that I learned, I would have been diagnosed with autism. And now they're seeing like, hey, there are specific things that we can actually look at and say, this is linked to autism. And of course, the Western medical system is like, no, we can't link it back to XYZ. But there are literally so many drastic changes in people with autism at this point once we just simply change the gut microbiome and get their gut back in order. And when you remove salicylates from their diet. So those are things that point directly to, hey, our gut is doing all of this for us. So when we correct it, how can we actually live? Right. And even as an adult in my early 30s, I was so sick. I had a ruptured appendix. I was in the hospital for a week. So yes, the medical system, they're great for acute conditions. I needed to be in the hospital when my appendix ruptured. Right. But I was on antibiotics for a week straight in the hospital. And my gut was horrible afterwards. I mean, I got to the point where I couldn't even throw a Frisbee without having, like, I almost had a heart attack. Like I had to sit for 10 minutes after throwing the Frisbee once because I had such histamine issues. And the way that I was operating, I wouldn't look people in the eyes. I wore sunglasses when I went into the stores. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I went back into that space again.
Whoa.
And it took me a few years to get back to working with my gut, getting things back in order, to actually start being me again, vibrant and, talkative and wanting to like actually engage people. And that was like where things really started shifting for me as far as looking at this, like, hey, like my gut was literally sending these signals to my brain that was like turning everything off. It didn't want to function. And that's where I actually started diving into the gut microbiome 100%.
So you attribute you going into a store and not wanting to look at people in the eye and not wanting to be around people, you attribute that to your gut even?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I cannot even explain when you get into the research of certain species and of our gut microbiome, what they can do to people is just off the charts. So our gut microbiome is actually it works to make us attracted to certain people. It attracts us to certain foods. It can actually cause obesity because these gut microbiomes will send a signal to your brain that says, eat this, not that. And so when people look at being overweight, there's a new way to look at this. Like you actually have a bug inside of you that's saying like, I want to keep eating this, right? Like, because one, yes, it's like feeding our candida and everything of that sort, But to remember that all of those funguses and viruses and everything that live in our body, they are literally, if they can get into, if they're seeping through, if we have leaky gut and they're seeping through, they can cause so many neurological symptoms. And the easiest way that I could let people know about this is over 90% of what happens in our brain. So our serotonin is created in our gut, right? And when we're not working that correctly, everything's not functioning properly, it's going to throw off our balance. And so when you look at that simple fact alone, that over 90% of it is created in our gut, that should say everything, right? So the gut brain axis is one of the most beautiful things that you can learn about. And our vagus nerve, which is the biggest vein in our body, it's beautiful. I love talking about the vagus nerve, but the reality is it's connected. It connects our gut and our brain. And there are over 1 million nerves that run from our gut to our brain. And I think a lot of people, we talk about how the gut is a second brain, but I like to remind people that I think the gut is really the first brain, because what we ate is what built our brain. It's what gave us all of our abilities at this point. And so what we eat is literally going to affect our neurological system 100%.
Okay. And earlier you mentioned that things such as antibiotics and vaccines, which ring the bell. I mean, what have we been talking about the last 3-4 years? Alcohol, smoking, all these things can affect the gut and the microbiome.
Oh, yeah.
So how do you reverse the effects of those things? So obviously, if it's alcohol and smoking, you stop them. But let's say you have an ear infection, you go to your doctor and they say you need to take this antibiotic for this ear infection. It's 5 days, take it every single day. How do you reverse the negative effects that antibiotic then has on your microbiome?
So this is twofold. One, learn about natural antibiotics. For one, garlic has more antibiotic properties than penicillin. So I like to remind people that antibiotics came from a natural source originally. They just turned it into something completely different and made all these additives in order to sell it at a much higher price tag, right? So salicylates are actually, so aspirin, for example, is mostly salicylates. Where do you find salicylates? In plants, right? So it's a really easy thing to wrap your head around, that natural antibiotics have so many amazing properties. And the thing is, our gut doesn't become resistant to them. And so, I mean, if you think back, a lot of people who are listening, they might understand, when I was young and I had an earache, what did my grandparents do? They heated up some oil with some garlic, dropped it in my ear, felt better, right?
Wow.
Like they knew. So what we consider new age medicine is not new. It's the old medicine, and we're needing to find our way back to it. Before we had Western doctors, we had natural medicine. This is what we did. We utilized the plants. Native Americans utilized the plants. They knew how to use them. They knew the properties of them. And then everything just started switching thanks to money, right? Like the Western medical system is $1 trillion industry, and they are set up to make people fail. They continue keeping people sick. And of course, like we talked about earlier, a lot of doctors don't understand this going into it. But unfortunately, I'm going to clear this. During COVID, I had friends who, when they went into the hospital for something, it didn't matter what, they heard people who were sitting next to them, and the doctors would come out, and if someone died, due to cardiovascular issues or diabetes or anything of the sort, they were asking people to, like their family, to put COVID on the death certificate so they could get extra money. And they were going to pay these people to allow them to do this. And so that is what we were working with, and nobody knows about it. I mean, it was happening all over the place. There's actually an episode that I did where I was talking with someone, and there were a bunch of people on the same podcast who were talking about, like, yeah, my doctor came out and asked me if they could put XYZ on the death certificate of their family member. And I was like, my God, like, it's a big industry. Like, I want people to know that it is set for money, and the more doctors can make, the better. And so they're pushed by the pharmaceutical industries. They are taught, hey, if you sell this, we'll give you this. We'll send you on this vacation. We'll do XYZ. And that is where doctors fall into the trap, right? But more and more now we're having doctors learn about functional medicine, because if they really want to help people, they're starting to go that direction. Okay, so with the antibiotics, back to this.
Yeah.
You need to learn that there are natural ways of helping your body. And when you're having chronic conditions like ear infections or throat infections or whatever, that is saying like, hey, if you're having this on a regular basis, something's wrong and you need to figure out why you're having these. Don't just keep getting the antibiotics. Okay. And two, it's the vaccines. We actually had people come into our clinic during that time after they got antibiotics and they were like, something's wrong. And I was like, well, yeah, something's wrong, but let's look at it from a different perspective. Their gut microbiome shifted over 80% after one vaccine. And
Wow.
I mean, a big chunk of the clients that I had during that time were having histamine issues. Their cycles changed. They're having headaches. They, just so many different things. And it was just from looking at their microbiome and realizing like, hey, you damaged your microbiome 80%. We need to get this back in check. And I don't think a lot of people want to look at that implication, right? Because they're being fed this mass media of this is what I'm supposed to do and this is what's going to help people, instead of realizing like you have no idea what this is doing to your body, aside from the other damage that it was causing, but your gut microbiome alone. And so when we do these things, we need to take probiotics, right? And unfortunately, when you go into the hospital and you're put on antibiotics, they still don't prescribe you a probiotic to take in conjunction with it and to repopulate your gut, because you're not just killing off the bad bacteria and the viruses. In fact, the majority of what's in your body is not bad. You're also killing off all of the good and beneficial bacteria.
Yes.
And that is going to be detrimental to your health.
What's up, Be Better family? It's Brandon Eastman here. And as a thank you for tuning in to the Be Better broadcast, I want to give you a very special gift. For a limited time, you can get a free digital copy of my book titled Be Extraordinary, Your Guide to Self-Mastery. This book is packed with insights and actionable steps that will help you to unlock your fullest potential in the 5 key areas of your life. But that's not all. Along with the book, I also want to give you the audiobook version absolutely free. Imagine having the power to transform your life right at your fingertips and in your ears anytime, anywhere. Go grab your copy at BeBetterIndustries.com/book. You'll also find the link in the episode show notes. Go and grab your copy and join me in making a positive impact on the world. Now back to the show. It's funny you say that because our son just had a double ear infection, and we brought him to his doctor and he prescribed him an antibiotic, but he also prescribed him a probiotic. And we didn't know what this thing was. When we got it from the pharmacy, we're like, he didn't tell us about this little pink package. What do we do with this? So we called and he's like, yeah, that's a probiotic that you want to mix in with his water or his bottle or whatever it is. And I was like, okay, that's really cool. No one's ever given us that for him before. And I've certainly never had someone offer me that. So that's cool.
Amazing.
That physician did give that in conjunction.
Good for them. Bravo.
Dr. Tom, shout out to you. So let me ask you this. And I still want to ask you more about the gut too, a few specific things. You keep mentioning functional medicine, functional health. What is functional health versus the traditional healthcare physicians that we have today? And I'll ask you kind of a dual part here. What is it? And do people have functional health doctors and practitioners that they go to versus a physician, or do you employ both? Like, what does it look like functionally to work with a functional health practitioner?
As a functional medicine practitioner, you look for the root cause of disease, right? And that means looking at your liver, looking at your digestive system, looking at your bowel habits, looking at your stress levels, everything. How are you living? How are you living? Are you working out? Are you doing XYZ? What are you eating? All of these things, that's functional. That is, how are you living as a human being, right? Mm-hmm. Instead of in the Western medical system, as I just said, looking for the symptoms and covering them up, masking them with a Band-Aid, right? Just putting this like little slap on in this label and saying, okay, you need to take XYZ. They don't give you advice on what you need to do in order to get better. And I like to remind people, if you're in a Western medical system at this point and you have a Western practitioner and you say, hey, I want to try the carnivore diet, for example, or I want to try this protocol or anything, and they say, no, that's not a good idea, find another practitioner. Like, it doesn't matter if you want to stay in the Western medical system, find someone who is going to work with you on that and say, okay, like if you want to do this, I'm here for you, and let's figure this out together. Okay, you need someone who is progressive, because unfortunately a lot of people in the Western medical system, they're stuck in the dinosaur ages. They're stuck on what they learned 30, 40 years ago, and that's not relevant anymore. And I think that's like a big thing. It's like we need to remember that we are always progressing forward. We're always learning new things. We're always learning new techniques, and we're learning about the body more and more. And we need progressive doctors. And so while I would suggest people find a functional medicine doctor, leave the rest behind, a lot of people aren't going to be comfortable doing that because they're stuck in their old ways too. And so we need to take them step by step. And for me, it's like, okay, then stay with your Western medical doctor, sure, but also try to find someone else who's going to give you a second opinion. And this comes down to everything, because one of the things that I like to tell people about is the power of our mind, right? We know now how powerful our brain is. And it's to the point where there's a guy, it's just one of the millions of examples, who was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And his doctor said, you have 4 months to live. Go home, take care of your affairs, get everything in order, do what you need to do, right? The guy died almost 4 months to the date. And his wife one day got a call from the doctor and was like, hey, we actually misdiagnosed your husband. He did not have stage 4 pancreatic cancer, but he ended up dying anyways. And this guy had absolutely no cancer in his body. The biopsy, nothing. And it was because his doctor was so adamant about, this is your diagnosis. This is what it is. There's no going back. And he took that, the guy who died took it on to heart, believed it, embodied that, and died. And so it's important to, one, remember the power of your mind and what you are susceptible to. You are constantly being hypnotized in this world, constantly, by advertisements, by billboards, by media, by what you're watching. And what you're taking on and you believe is going to dictate a lot about how you live. And it's another thing to remember that doctors misdiagnose all the time. And to remember that what you are diagnosed with does not equate a death sentence. Get a second opinion, get a third opinion, until you find hey, this person might actually be able to help me, get to that point. Don't just take on, hey, this is what you need to do. And to follow exactly what they say, you need to do radiation, you need to do chemotherapy, all of these different things that doctors are going to tell you, get a second opinion. There are better ways to do this. We know that chemotherapy is actually the leading cause of most deaths with patients with cancer, and yet they're still pushing this. And it's like, how are we still not paying attention to this? We know this information now. So how do people not know this, right? And unfortunately so we have technology, thankfully, where people are actually getting this information now, but we don't talk about this stuff in the mainstream media. Most people don't, they don't hear this stuff. They have to search outside of it. And this should be elementary. We should know how to take care of our bodies. Functional medicine is about taking care of our bodies and living a healthy lifestyle and doing things with integrity versus just, hey, I want a pill, fix this, right? And the reality is, when people go in for that treatment and they get a pill to correct something, that pill, more often than not, is going to create other symptoms down the road that you're going to end up having to take care of. And they know this. The pharmaceutical companies, they know this. And they know this 3 years in advance. They keep it on the market anyways. And then 3 years later, they're like, oh, we found something about this product and it's causing XYZ. So we're going to pull it for the market. Let's put a new product on the shelf. But they knew this from the get-go. They know that this was causing symptoms from the start, but they keep it on the market, right? And this is why there's so many lawsuits for pharmaceuticals. And I think people don't wrap their head around how many people die every single day from pharmaceutical use. And it can be as simple as an antibiotic. And so it's really about just seeing there is a different way. It is not black and white. You need to do research. You need to learn. You need to educate yourself and to understand what you're doing and what you're listening to.
So even functional medicine can even help people who have cancer using these principles
Absolutely.
by getting to the root cause of where that cancer came from.
Yes.
Wow.
So I'm going to give you one simple tip, and it's $1 million tip. Okay. And this is the reality that we know this, but the information is not being known. Cancer feeds on glucose. Okay. We have such a high carb intake, and especially in our society, but actually around the world. 80%, over 80% of the population has insulin resistance. Insulin resistance comes right before prediabetes. Prediabetes obviously comes before diabetes. Insulin resistance means that you're not processing insulin correctly in your body. And that means that the glucose is going to have this, like, your cells are going to go on a rampage because you have all of this excess glucose that's circulating in your system. And what happens is with insulin resistance is when you're not processing that correctly, insulin actually makes cells grow. Okay. And so when you have cancer cells in your body and you're eating these high carb diets, you're literally feeding these cancer cells. Not only that, though, your insulin is going to spike, and insulin is going to make those cells grow even more. So it's just like, it's a proliferation of things that you absolutely do not want to happen. And that simple tip has shifted people immensely with their diagnoses. Okay. Because when you take away the glucose and you're not feeding those cells anymore, they die. They go, we go into the system where our body's actually able to operate, everything's functioning properly, because I like to remind people that insulin resistance affects literally every single cell of your body. And for a long time, they didn't think it affected your brain, but they finally found that, oh, this literally affects everything that's happening in your system. And when you can have insulin resistance affecting your liver, you can have it affecting your gut, it can affect your brain, it affects everything. So when everything's not functioning properly, you're not able to eliminate toxins. And that's one of the big problems, is you need to eliminate toxins. You need to be digesting and you need to be eliminating all of these things. And constipation is a chronic condition. A lot of people have chronic constipation.
Yeah.
And so all of those, they start recirculating. All those toxins start recirculating. Estrogen starts recirculating. All of these things are just continuing to damage the body. But when you take that high carb diet out of your life, your body can function at its best and actually heal. And you said that you got on the carnivore diet, and that is a big reason that you're feeling so good, is because your body is finally actually able to function. Because let me put it into perspective for you this way. The average American, okay, is eating, let's say for breakfast, they're having toast, they're having orange juice, they're having pancakes, they're having all these things. They're easily eating over 150 grams of carbs in one meal, when we shouldn't even be exceeding 150 carbs in a day.
Yeah.
Okay. And they're doing this 3 times a day. And that is the number one reason that we are sick. Insulin resistance is the number one reason that we do not feel good, why we have chronic health conditions, why people are dying, why we have diabetes. That is like the number one cause. And it's 1 in 2 people have prediabetes at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's 50%. And I think that's like something that people need to wrap their head around, that there is something off, and it is as simple as what we are eating. When we shift that one thing and we remove the majority of carbs from our diet, your body can like actually do what it needs to do to remove all of the toxins and to actually come back into balance and to help us function. And that's why we think about diabetic rage, right? People who get aggressive when their blood sugars are fluctuating, that is insulin resistance. That is like exactly what we can look at and say, hey, this is caused by insulin resistance. Let's fix this one thing. And all of a sudden people are reversing cancers. I mean, there are people with stage 4 cancers going on a keto diet and going into remission within months.
Oh my God.
Right? And so it's like, we need to just look at like the simplicity of it. It's really not that complicated. It's how did we eat? ancestrally. We ate mostly meat because during the winters, we didn't grow these foods. We didn't have those accessible. We hunted. We mostly ate meat during that time. And yeah, and here and there we had berries. We'd grow berries, but they didn't grow in like masses. We ate handfuls of berries. That's it. We
Yeah.
didn't eat all these different fruits together. We didn't eat all of these high carb things. We did it like mindfully. It was in small practices.
This is so important for everyone to hear, because so much of what you've said, I've had no idea. That whole line of cancer feeds on glucose, and these cancer patients, one, that story of the mind you told with that one man who was told he had 4 months and it wasn't even real, and then he's gone. It shows the power of the mind. But at the same time, you've clearly demonstrated that your gut and your microbiome and what you're putting into your body also heavily influences your mind. So to me, it almost sounds like that's a really great place to start, is to optimize your gut in order to feel better by being conscious and intentional with foods that we're eating every single day. So I've got one more question I want to ask you, but I want to talk about your course first. So you've got a course right now. I believe you're still in the pre-launch, which is called the Functional Health and Wellness course. And it's a very reasonable price. I think it's $50 for the pre-launch for someone to join to really take control of their health. Who doesn't have $50 to put towards their health? So let me ask you this. What does your Functional Health and Wellness course entail? What does it look like for the average person to go through?
So it is literally everything that I want people to know about their health and what causes chronic illness and how to take care of your body, what it means to live a mindful life, and how to actually incorporate these healing modalities into your life easily. And the reason I'm doing this for $50 is because I do think that people should have access to this. It should be elementary. We should be learning this. And I think that it's just important for people to have a platform that they can go to find out, like, hey, I have diabetes. Why is this happening? It's not genetics. It's not because you're raised in a certain family. Yeah, sure, people have genetic dispositions, but the reality is we now know, thanks to epigenetics, that 90% of what happens to you is based off of your lifestyle, not your genetics. And so I dive into that with this course of everything you need to know about healthy eating and what certain symptoms are telling you and what are the 3 main causes of all disease and how to overcome these, with simple tips. Now, it's important to know that I give people all of the tools in there, literally everything that I would want someone to know about. Hey, this is why XYZ is happening. But the reality is you are the only person that can actually be in charge of your healing. I can give you tools. It's my favorite quote is, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, right? Sure. You are in charge of how you feel in this life. You're either going to get better and do better, or you're going to continue down the same path. And I like to ask people, if you are in the same position that you're in right now, 5 years from now, are you going to be happy? Right. And a lot of times, of course, it's no, like there's no way I could keep living this life. And I created that course for that reason. I want people to have the tools that they need to take their health into their own hands and to actually live a happier and healthier existence. And $50 is a no excuse price. Yeah. And that is hey, I want to get better. I've been dealing with this for 10 plus years. My doctors haven't helped me. What do I need to do? Mm-hmm. And so the course it's super simple. It's basic. It's easy for people to understand. And it is just all the information that I had to go through. I had to find myself for my own healing and everything that I've done to help clients after that.
So amazing. Yeah, you're taking your 15 years of experience and compressing it into however long the course is. Just really the logistics real quick of the course. How long's the course? What's the commitment look like for someone going through it?
It is at your own pace. I'm still working on it. So once it's done, but when you still buy it in the pre-launch, and it's $50, but it is at your own pace. You'll have it for lifetime access, and it's just easy information. You move through it step by step at your own pace whenever you want.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. So where can people find out more information about that? Is it at your website?
It is, yes. It's at www.linnrivers.com, and that's LINN-rivers.com. And excellent. Everything's accessible on there.
Perfect. Links are in the description, guys, to check that out. So my final question I want to ask you is, if there's one thing that you could leave us with today, where if we did this, we would be headed in the right direction and be a great foundation and starting point to optimize our gut, our microbiome, and to live a better life, what would that piece of advice be?
To invest in yourself. And that means, yes, with money, time, and energy, right? To really care about who you are, to love yourself first. And I say that because it's when you put yourself first and you actually give yourself that self-care, all of that is part of the healing, right? It's going to be healing for your gut alone, because you're going to start caring about, what am I eating? What am I drinking? Who am I hanging out with? Am I stressed? Where am I working? All of these things that play into your gut health, because when you're stressed out, when you're unhappy, when you're feeling attacked in any kind of way, emotionally, physically, whatever, all of those things are going to have an impact on your gut. And this is why so many people, they actually heal immensely and quickly when they get out of unhealthy relationships, or when they move locations, or all these different simple things that we think about. Those things are going to be part of your healing, and investing in yourself. I mean, I can't tell you that the biggest problem that I run into with clients is they don't take care of themselves, in the fact of they put everyone else first, and they think about everyone else first. And the reality is, you have to take care of yourself before you can help anyone else. And that is like one of the biggest things that I think, if people learn that, is you can't drink from an empty cup, or you can't give from an empty cup, right? And it's true. It's, you have to fill yourself up first before you can help others. And investing in yourself means, what do I need to be happy? Do I need new hobbies? Do I need new friends? Do I need to do something? And actually taking those steps, looking at yourself, asking questions of, is this going to make me a better person? Is going out and drinking tonight going to make me feel good tomorrow? Just like really asking yourself, every step that you take, is this moving me closer towards my goals, or further away?
Great question to ask, and great piece of advice. And before we leave, I just wanted to commend you, because you're a very unique kind of person. You're a blend, which is very rare to find, of someone who is very knowledgeable, someone who can communicate that knowledge, and someone who can communicate that knowledge with passion. And you check all of those boxes. Like, I can't believe we just got all this, and I didn't pay you anything to be here. You're giving this away. And again, guys, check out whatever part of this makes the most sense for you. Check out Linn's course, linnrivers.com. Link is in the description, because you've given us so much here. I learned a lot personally, and I'm really glad that our conversation went in this direction, because I didn't really know what direction it would go in, but I think that this information is really important for everyone to have. So I thank you very much for it. And this has been a pleasure, Linn. This has been an awesome conversation with Linn. I hope you took away a lot from the conversation. Be sure to go to the description, check out Linn's course. I'm going to have her social media handles down there as well, so you can follow her and keep up to date with more of her updates and the content that she posts. I hope you loved the episode. And if you did, please share the episode with just one other person who could use it as well. Thank you for being the best part of the Be Better team. And until we talk again next time, continue to be better.